Let's continue our discussion on epigastric pain with quantity and nature of food. Let's talk about first quantity of food. Problems with the quantity of food may lie in eating either too little or too much. In affluent industrialized countries, it would seem strange that anyone could suffer from insufficient food intake. But even here, there are pockets of extreme poverty, and certain groups in the population may suffer nutritional deficiencies simply from not having enough food. Secondly, nutritional deficiencies can arise when people subject themselves to very strict slimming diets. In some cases, this leads to severe anorexia. Thirdly, people may have a deficient diet not because they do not eat enough, but because they eat devitalized food that are devoid of any nutritional value. Fourthly, although when properly applied, vegetarian or vegan diets can be perfectly healthy and also ecologically and ethically sound, people who follow them may unwittingly deprive themselves of essential nutrients seen from the point of view of Chinese dietary principles. For example, some vegetarians may tend to eat too much cheese, which produces dampness, or salads, which produce cold and injures yin yang. On the other hand, they will not eat warm blood-producing foods such as meat, and there are few vegetarian foods which as such a quality. A person who suffers from severe deficiency of blood, for example, would benefit from a small amount of meat in the diet. Finally, old people who live alone often tend not to eat enough because they lack the stimulation of eating in company and cannot be bothered to cook for one person only. Eating too little in various ways described previously causes a dull epigastric pain, tiredness, and weak muscles. Eating too much is, of course, a very frequent cause of stomach disorders. By this, we mean eating too large meals rather than constant nibbling, which will be discussed later. Eating too much very simply leads to retention of food so that stomach chi cannot descend. This causes sour regurgitation, epigastric pain, fullness, belching, and foul breath. Of course, there is no single fixed standard that lays down the ideal quantity of food eaten. Much depends on a person's occupation, and someone who is engaged in heavy physical work should obviously eat more than someone whose work is sedentary. As the amount of food eaten should be regulated according to one's physical activity, it follows that at weekend, when most people are inactive, one should eat less than during the week in most countries. The exact opposite happens when people tend to have large meals that weekend. Now let's talk about the nature of food. The nature of food eaten is of paramount importance in stomach disorders. Food are classified according to their nature, that is cold, cool, or neutral. And their taste, that is sour, bitter, sweet, pungent, or salty. The subject of foods and their action in health and disease is a vast one and beyond the scope of this book. With regard to stomach disorders, 4 broad categories of food can be identified. First, we have cold foods. These are raw vegetables, salads, fruit, cooked cold drinks, and ice cream. Excessive consumption of this food will tend to create cold in the spleen and stomach and ensuing epigastric pain. Next type of food, hot spicy foods. This includes curries, spices, lamb, beef, and alcohol. Excessive consumption of this food produces stomach heat, which may manifest with a burning epigastric pain, thirst, and a yellow tongue coating. Next type is sugar and sweets. An excessive consumption of this may tend to produce both dampness and heat in the stomach. The next type, greasy foods, fried foods, and dairy foods. An excessive consumption of this leads to the formation of phlegm or dampness in the stomach. Chinese dietary principles are very old and do not consider the great changes that have occurred in the growing and production of food in the past decades. Modern food is subject to considerable chemical manipulations, and a great many of the food additives can obviously be a cause of stomach problems and indeed of many other disorders. For example, the correlation between artificial colorings and hyperactivity in children is well documented. Modern food contains not only additives such as flavorings, colorings, preservatives, and emulsifiers, but also traces of drugs such as antibiotics and hormones found in milk and meat. Moreover, food and water are often contaminated with the residues of chemical pesticides and fertilizers. All this can obviously be causes of stomach disorders. Thank you for listening.